Welcome back to another very exciting tutorial here at the PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. My name is Jesus Ramirez, and you can find me on Instagram at JRFromPTC. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the top new features in Adobe Photoshop CC 2015.5. After you watch this tutorial, don't forget to head over to my website, PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com, or you can use the short URL, ptcvids.com, and read all about the smaller changes not covered in this video. Okay, let's check out some of the new features in Photoshop CC 2015.5. The Face Aware Liquify. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to go into the filter menu and I'm going to click on Liquify. And you already may be familiar with the Liquify feature, but this version includes a new feature. Notice this icon here, that is the face tool. And what happens is that Photoshop detects any faces found in your image. You can disable it by clicking on any other tool, and you can re-enable it again by clicking on this icon or pressing A on the keyboard. Notice that as I hover over the image, I get these displays over the face. So Photoshop knows that this is the face and we can make some adjustments. And before we move forward, let's take a look at the right-hand side of the panel. First of all, notice that it looks a little bit different than older versions, but we have this option here called Face Aware Liquify, and we have some of the facial features here that we can adjust. We can adjust them by either clicking and dragging on the handles here. So notice how her eyes are getting bigger and smaller. If I click and drag up, I can also adjust her jaw, her lips. This is actually the bottom lip or the upper lip. I can actually give her a smile or not. And I can make any type of adjustments just by clicking and dragging on these handles. Also, I want you to notice that if I hover over an area and you get that four-sided arrow, you can click and drag and move that facial feature, in this case the eye. We can do the same thing with the nose. And we can do the same thing with the mouth. Now, if you want to make more refined adjustments, come into these sliders here on the right and you can adjust each of these specific areas. So if you want to adjust the eyes, you can just click and drag this slider to the left or right and just make any adjustments that you need. I'm not going to click and drag on all the sliders just because they're very self-explanatory, so you can just come in and play around with them, but I just want you to see the power of this filter. Also, one thing I want to mention is that you can come in here and use any of the old Liquify tools. For example, I'm going to click on the warp tool and I'm going to increase the size of my brush by tapping on the right bracket key on my keyboard and just make some distortions to her face. Now she looks like an alien. Notice that even after making these adjustments, I can press A on the keyboard to go back into the Face Aware Liquify tool, and I can continue making adjustments to her eyes. And the distortions from the warp tool did not disrupt the Face Aware feature. So for now, I'm going to press cancel and I'm going to open up another image. Is this selfie here? And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go into filter, Liquify, and notice what happens now. Photoshop automatically detects the faces of everybody in this scene. I can click on select face and we have the numbers 1 through 5. So the way Photoshop aligns them is from left to right. So this is face 1, face 2, face 3, face 4, and face 5. So for example, if we want to select this girl here in the middle, that is face number 4, and we can adjust her forehead or make any other adjustments that we like. Now, obviously in these examples, I'm going a little extreme. I'm clicking and dragging these sliders to the far end just so that the adjustments are noticeable. But obviously when you're working on a portrait or a group shot like this, the adjustments that you make are going to be very subtle. So keep that in mind, unless of course you're trying to create a caricature or something like that. I also want to point out that the Face Aware feature does not work with profile shots, and with some semi-profile shots you may get some issues. Also, if the face is tilted beyond 30 degrees, you will need to rotate the photo so that you can apply this effect. So for example, this girl here in the center, if her head were tilted just a little bit more to the right, the facial features would not be recognized. Once you press OK, the changes are going to be made into your image. Obviously, we were working on a regular layer. We were working destructively. Luckily for us, this feature also works with smart objects. So I can convert this into a smart object, go into filter, Liquify, and make any other adjustments that I like. This time I'm adjusting face number 1, which is this guy. So any adjustments that I make, I can press OK and they will be made non-destructively. Also, I want you to notice one thing that happened here. When I adjusted this person's face, the Liquify tool created some transparent pixels. So if this was an adjustment that I actually wanted to make, I would have to come back in here and either fill that in with content aware or maybe just crop it out. Another thing that you can do with the face aware Liquify is apply that filter to video. So I have a video here that we're going to use, but before we get started, I'm going to open up the timeline panel and I'm going to click on create video timeline. So we're going to place our video here. I'm going to go into file, place linked, and I have an MP4, a video file here. And this is just me talking and moving my head around so you can see how this effect is going to work. It's a very short video, it's roughly 5 seconds. And applying this filter to a video works just like applying it to images. So now that we have the Liquify face video layer here, you'll see it here in the timeline. And I'm actually going to delete the original layer just so we only have one layer to worry about and it's a little less confusing. So with this layer selected, I'm going to go into filter, Liquify. In Photoshop, immediately it's going to recognize the face in the video and we can make adjustments just as we did with the images. So I'm just going to make a few quick adjustments, something like that, and press OK. I can then click on the play button and it's going to be a little choppy just because the video is not rendered. But as you can see, the effect was applied. I'm going to click and drag on this to zoom in into the video layer. And I'm just going to scroll through the video and you can see how those adjustments were applied. I can come in here into the layers panel and disable the effect. So this is what it looks without it. And I can just enable the effect again, and you'll see how the effect is applied even though I'm moving around and talking. If you want to render out the video, just click on the flyout menu here and select render video. You can name it and then you can click on select folder to decide where to save it. And the default settings with H.264 should work, and then click on render. Here's the before and after of the face-aware Liquify filter applied to the video. The content-aware crop. The first thing that I'm going to do in this example is I'm going to click on the crop tool. And in the past, what we usually did is click on the straighten tool and we would click and draw a line along a straight area of the image, and Photoshop would crop that into a much smaller area. This is because a crop always wanted to keep active pixels. It wouldn't give us anything like this with transparent pixels. So when we would create the crop, we would get a very tight result and we would lose a lot of information. The new content aware feature found on the options bar allows us to make that same adjustment, but Photoshop fills in with content aware on these areas that are going to be left with transparent pixels. So I'm going to click on this checkbox to commit the changes, and Photoshop is going to go ahead and fill in those pixels. And you can sort of see the selections here on the top, the bottom, and on the sides. And there you go. Photoshop filled in the pixels up here and on the other corners. The content aware feature with the crop tool is also good if you want to expand on the sky. So if we had this image here and we wanted more sky, we can simply click and drag up, commit the changes. This time I'm just going to hit the enter key on the keyboard. In Photoshop, it's going to go in and fill in the transparent pixels on this image with the sky. We could also do the same thing with the water. I can click and drag this down in case we wanted more water, commit the changes, and the same thing's going to happen. Photoshop is going to fill in those pixels and we're going to have more water. Now, even though this is a great tool and it works great for skies, for water, grass, and things like that, it's not going to be as precise when we're dealing with buildings or things with more detail. So if I click and drag this to the left here to fill this area in, we are going to get some issues. So just keep that in mind when you're working with your images. As you can see there, it's not a perfect fill. But it's still a great feature to utilize because you will get to use more of your image than you would have otherwise. The match font feature. So we have this pixel layer here. It's a bitmap image. This is not a vector or a text layer. As you can see, just one single pixel layer. And what the match font feature allows you to do is create a selection around a piece of text. Photoshop looks at that text and it gives you results that are very similar to the typeface found within the selection. So the results are fonts that are either installed in your machine or fonts that you can download from Typekit. So now that I have the word welcome selected, I'm going to go into type and select match font. This window is going to populate with fonts that are similar to the ones we've selected. The fonts on top of the list are fonts that are installed in my computer, and the fonts here in the bottom are fonts that are available to download from Typekit. So these are the closest fonts found that resemble the text under welcome. So some of these are pretty close, some more than others, of course. I'm gonna just press OK, and now I'm gonna select the text here, the wine. So I'm gonna go and just select the lasso tool, make a selection around that text. Then I'm gonna go into Type, Match Font, and again, Photoshop is gonna populate a list with the fonts that matches closest to what I've selected. And notice that these are scripts similar to what we have here. So if you find a font that you wanna use, so maybe you wanna use this brush script font here, we can just select it, press OK. If we click on the Type tool, you'll notice that that font is now selected. So I can deselect this here, Control D, Command D to deselect, and I can just click on my canvas and just type the word Photoshop, for example. Just keep in mind that whenever you're using this feature, the font that's on the image may not be available on your machine or on Typekit, and you're just gonna get the closest approximation. Alternate glyphs. We're gonna be working with this file here. We have this background group and we have this text layer. The text layer reads, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog," and that's a pangram, a sentence that contains every letter in the alphabet. And this is going to help us see what the new feature in Photoshop is with the Glyphs panel. So the last version of Photoshop introduced us to the Glyphs panel, which is this panel here. And as you can see, this is the typeface that we're using and all the glyphs that we can use. The new feature allows us to select a specific glyph and see if there's an alternate and swap it. Let me show you the slow way of doing it. So I'm going to select my glyph, that letter G. Then I'm going to go into the Glyphs panel and I'm going to click on this drop down and select alternates for selection. And this is going to show me all the alternate glyphs for this character in this typeface. And as you can see, we currently have selected the letter G, which is a two-story G, an open tail G. And we want a single story, a loop tail G, which is this one here. So we can swap that out. Now, as you just saw, although that was quick, it took a couple of clicks to get there. The new feature allows us to simply select any character, and then if the character has this block, this shaded block underneath it, you can hover over it and see the alternate glyphs for this character. In this case, we've selected a double story A, but we can swap it into a single story A. And we can actually select any other letter and see if there's an alternate right under it. Sometimes the alternate is not as good, so you don't have to make a change if you don't want to. And also keep in mind that not all fonts have alternate glyphs that you can use. For example, if we select a font that you probably know, like Arial, you'll notice that if I hover over any one of these characters, I won't get the shaded block underneath, so I don't have any alternate glyphs. And if I go back into the Glyphs panel and refresh the list by reselecting alternate for selection, you'll see that there's nothing there. Usually fonts that have the word Pro in the name will give you an alternate glyph. So for example, this one called Chaparro Pro Bold, I can hover over the letter K here and see an alternate K. So you can select the glyph that best works for the design that you're going for. Also, there's this right pointing arrow, and if you click on it, it opens up the Glyphs panel here on the right, but you don't really need it. You can just hover over this block and select the glyph that you want to use. The Select and Masking Workspace. This workspace replaces a previous Refine Edge and Refine Mask dialog boxes in Photoshop, and it allows us to visualize and select content in a new way. But before we get started with that, I'm going to show you the layers that we're going to be working with. We have this forest here, the background, and this foreground, this bear. So we're gonna mask out the bear and place them in the forest. So to access this new Select and Mask workspace, you can click on any selection tool, like the marquee tool, and then click on Select and Mask. And you'll notice that the tools bar now has only a few tools, and the properties panel on the right has some masking options for you to use. Notice the Select and Mask here under the workspace. Before we go any further, I'm going to press cancel and I'm going to show you an easier way to access this workspace. So instead of clicking on a selection tool and then clicking on this button, just remember the keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-R, that's Command Option R on the Mac, and it brings you directly into this workspace without having to click on any selection tools. And the first thing we'll talk about is how you can use the tools that are found in this toolbar to make a selection. First of all, we have the quick selection tool, which you can get to by clicking on it or pressing the W key on the keyboard, and you can just click and drag to start making a selection. Notice that the image is currently set to the onion skinning mode. We only have a transparency of 20%. That means that the selective items are going to be shown at 100% and the deselected items are going to be shown at 20%. So we have the head partially selected, which is why it looks opaque, and the rest of the image is at 20% opacity. And if we increase that transparency to 100%, notice that the rest of the image disappears. So this slider allows you to adjust the transparency so you can make better selections. So in general, what you want to do is use the quick selection tool to select the main areas of your image, then toggle between the brush tool and lasso tool to make corrections and more refined selections to specific areas. So we have the lasso tool here and the brush tool here. We're going to talk about the refine edge tool a little later on. So let's focus first on the brush tool. This works just like the regular brush tool. If you click and drag, you'll paint essentially with white. If you think of this as a mask, this is just like painting with white. You have the same keyboard shortcuts: left bracket to decrease the size, right bracket key on the keyboard to increase the size of that brush. You can click on this down pointing arrow here and adjust the size, hardness, or spacing, or you can just simply right click anywhere on your image and that same display comes up. So we can adjust the hardness, go all the way to 100%, and you can see the hard edge there. You can also click on the lasso tool, click and drag and make a selection, and it fills in those areas. Notice that if we drag the transparency up to 100, now these are the selected areas. I usually like keeping my transparency around 20%. So now I'm going to press the W key to go back into the quick selection tool, and I'm just going to increase the brush size by tapping on the right bracket key on the keyboard, increasing the size, and continue selecting the bear. Notice that I accidentally selected the rocks where he's standing. I can either click on the minus option here, or better yet, hold Alt option on the Mac and deselect the areas that I don't like. And I can release the Alt key and continue selecting the areas that I do want to keep. At this point, I can bring the transparency all the way up to 100% just so I can see how my selection is looking. If I need a different view, I can click on this down pointing arrow and select Marching Ants Overlay, which is actually very similar to the quick mask mode, on black. Right now, the background is not really showing black because the opacity is set to 50%, but I can increase that up to 100% or bring that down if I want to. But if I'm going to use it on black, I probably would want it at 100%. On white is a similar effect, but obviously with a white background instead of black. Black and white, which is essentially the mask mode. And on layers. Right now we're not going to see anything in the background because the background layer is disabled. So I'm going to go back into the onion skin mode and I'm going to bring the transparency down just a little bit, maybe not all the way to 20% this time, maybe less now, since I've already selected the major points of my bear. And I just realized that I'm missing a spot here. So I'm going to press Z on the keyboard. I'm going to zoom in. And I'm going to press W for the quick selection tool. I'm going to tap on the left bracket key on the keyboard, hold Alt, Option on the Mac to subtract from that selection. I'm going to press Z again, then hold Alt, Option on the Mac, and zoom out. Now that I've selected the main areas of my image, I'm going to use the Edge Detection tool to remove the background and portions of the image that require additional refinement, such as the fur around the bear. So I'm going to click on the Refine Edge brush. Then I'm just going to click and drag around the edge of the bear to deselect the background around the fur. And notice that I'm going fairly quickly here. What I'm going to do now is bring the transparency back up to 100 just so we can see what we got. And I'm actually going to use the black and white because I really want to see what the mask is looking like. At this point, I can just click on the brush tool and I'm just going to paint using the plus sign there, which is essentially the white. The brush is a little hard, so I'm just going to right click and bring the hardness down and continue painting on the areas that I know that I'm going to want to keep. Then I'm going to hold Alt and just remove the areas that I know I don't want to keep. I'm going to zoom in and continue removing these areas. I'm still holding Alt to remove. I'm going to fit everything to screen just so we can see what we got. And just as a side note, if you're using the paintbrush and instead of using the add to selection, you're using subtract from selection, if you want to go back into the add to selection, you can hold shift and it adds. So if you're in the subtract to selection and you hold Alt, nothing will happen. So hold shift to add to a selection. But I usually like staying on the add to selection and then hold Alt to subtract. So now that we've refined the selection, I'm going to go into the on white view. I'm going to use some global refinements. So in some cases, you may want to smooth your selection. In this case, I don't think it's necessary, so I'm just going to leave it at 0. You can feather it, contrast, or shift the edge. I'm going to shift the edge and I'm going to do negative values just to remove that outline that we had around the bear. And actually, now that the bear is active, I'm noticing that I'm missing a little piece here. So I'm just going to click on the brush tool and just add to the selection in this area here. You can also press X on the keyboard to disable the views, but notice what happened here. I started typing X. So in a way, I'm kind of glad that happened. I'm just gonna get out of that, and Photoshop's gonna tell me that that's an invalid numeric value, and that's true, it is. But if I just press Enter on the keyboard, I'm gonna exit out of that, and if I press X this time, I get to see the original. So I can just toggle between the original and the masked areas just to see if I'm missing a piece. I'm missing a piece here, actually. So I'm just gonna paint that back in. And I'm missing another piece here. Okay, and the bear is looking pretty good. Before we press OK, I just want to mention that these controls here are very similar to what the refine edge and refine mask used to be. So we have the edge detection here with the smart radius. We have the same sliders. We have the output settings as well, and also the contaminate colors. And all these options are essentially the same as to what you had with the refine edge. There's also a reset button here in case you need it, and a sample all layers checkbox here in case the object you're trying to select is made up of different layers or something like that. So I'm gonna uncheck this for now, and I'm gonna press OK. Photoshop then creates a mask. If I need to go back, I can click on the layer mask and then click on select and mask here in the properties panel, or you can press Ctrl-Alt-R, Command-Option-R, and you're back. All right, now that I've made this mask, I can enable the forest. I can click on the layer, press V on the keyboard, move my bear and place him accordingly right about here, and maybe scale him down a little bit. So I'm gonna click on the pivot point, drag it down to his foot. That's where I want him standing. Hold Alt-Shift, Option-Shift on the Mac, and scale in proportion by clicking and dragging on that corner handle. Position him again and press Enter. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to zoom in so you could see the edge. Notice what good of a job this feature did masking out the fur on this bear, as you can see in these areas. So it looks fairly convincing. If you notice any mistakes like I'm seeing here, you can just paint with white on the mask. You don't have to go back into the refine and mask workspace. So I'm just going to paint with white here to fill that part in. Now, if I wasn't explaining what all those features were and how all the tools worked, then I probably would have completed this project in half the time. I was a big fan of the refine edge and refine mask, but I actually like the select and mask a lot more. It's more useful. The algorithm for making selections is better. And once again, I'm going to zoom in and you can see the good job it did here on the fur around the bear. And that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think about the new features by leaving a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to share it with a friend and click on that like button. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Photoshop training channel now. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.